Hello, everybody. This is Holy Foley, and I'm Dr. Vanessa Theme Ament. My guest today is Steve Lee, founder of the Hollywood Sound Museum, sound effects wrangler, sound effects editor, sound historian, and writer about all things in film sound. So glad we're wrapping up 2023 together. It's so good to see you.
How are you, dear? It's been a minute.
It's been a minute. It's been a minute. I just thought it would be fun to wrap up the year with you because you're in touch with a lot of different things with film sound. And this is mostly about what I would call performative film sound, which is the way I like to talk about Foley, because I like to talk about it on a higher level of just more than, well, I don't know, what shoes did you use and what movie did you work on? There's plenty of that going around because you talk to a lot of different people
Yeah.
in film and in sound. I thought it would be really fun to talk to you about what you've been gleaning in the world of Foley, film sound, how it's relating to the Hollywood Sound Museum. And I want to start out with you talking about what's going on with the Hollywood Sound Museum, what you're going to be doing when you, I think you're going to be getting a building soon that you're going to start with before you get your permanent building, and what you'll be doing showing Foley. And I know that the Hollywood, the Academy Museum has a bit on film sound, but I don't think they're doing a lot.
It's very limited.
Yeah. So what will you be doing that might contrast and expand on that so that everybody knows what's different? Because I know you talk a lot on your podcast about it, and you write about it, and you talk about it, and you have a broad audience, but I just thought it would be kind of nice to talk about that a little bit.
The Academy Museum is absolutely wonderful, but they're very broadly focused. And right now, they promise to have rotating exhibits and things like that. Right now, their sound, talking about sound there is rather limited. There are a couple really fun things. Ben Bird has a wonderful exhibit where he did this 360 film of all these wonderful clips of science fiction and fantasy films with the sound sort of surrounding you, which is really neat. You get to hear about Ben's work on Raiders Lost Ark, working on the boulder sequence. You know, you get to hear all that stuff. But really, that's kind of it. I mean, you know, who knows what they're going to do in the future? They, like I said, they're going to rotate things, and they promise to, you know, keep changing and evolving. But it leaves a lot of room for something that, you know, like what I'm doing, where I'm focusing exclusively on sound, not just necessarily film, but like radio and video games and all entertainment media. But yeah, we hope to eventually, when we move into a bigger real place. We're all virtual right now, but we're going to be moving into a small office and have a few little start of what we're doing, and then eventually move to a bigger place as we grow. But we're going to cover as much of it as we can. And Foley is always, as you know, worked. When did I meet you? We met like in the early 80s. Yeah. Oh, 87 was it? That's right. Yeah. Yeah. That's about right.
Back in the day.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Film.
And just to kind of go back a little bit, walking back in history a little bit, some of the films that we really enjoyed working on, of course, because you were at Weddington, which started out Screaming Lizards, then Thunder Tracks, then Weddington. Some of the ones that we love to talk about so much, of course, Goofy Movie, and gosh, some of the films that I really enjoyed working on so much when Steve Flick was a part of it was Die Hard, and then Dave Stone and I did, you know, we were working on City Slickers 2 and Malice, and I mean, we did so many different things. We did, I can't even keep track of all of them because
it was a great time. Yeah, we were.
Oh yeah, the 80s and 90s were just a fantastic time.
No, we were very lucky to get all these wonderful films. It's funny you mentioned Die Hard. They're screening it at the El Capitan for Christmas.
Yeah, and Christmas Eve they're doing it out here in the desert at the Palm Springs Cultural Center. I think it's such a funny thing. That's a Christmas film now. And that's always, you know, kind of changed action film. Goofy Movie is one that we all love so much. I did the Foley supervision because I was
Yeah,
doing the Foley on another film at the time. So Joan Rowe did the Foley for me, but I was the Foley supervisor. And
yeah.
of course, we all love Kevin Lima, working with
Oh,
him.
Kevin's brilliant. Yeah, yeah. I chat with him online occasionally. He's a good guy. But
Yeah,
yeah, that's I get asked about that one, I think, more than anything.
I do
Um,
too. And it's funny having gotten the PhD and then having been a film professor. When I had all my millennial students, now we're in the
yeah,
Gen Zers, but when I had millennial students, the film they were most excited about that I had been involved with was a Goofy movie.
yeah,
And I have
yeah.
the poster in my office, and that was the one they were most excited about.
A dear friend of mine, actually, it's funny, I didn't realize I'd brought it, but a friend of mine gave me a tote bag that I keep my computer in that's got, you can't see it, but it's got power line on it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Do you
anyway.
know I still have in plastic, wrapped up preciously, the T-shirt that Kevin designed
Oh, yeah, yeah,
from it because I just don't even want to open it and wear it. I just treasure it so much.
right, right.
There's
Yeah,
the Batman crew jacket from Batman Returns that Tim designed. That I
yeah,
wear all the time because I love the crew jacket that Tim designed for Batman Returns. That I love to wear.
it's a really good one.
But the T-shirt that Kevin had, I wrap in plastic. I just don't even want to wear it because it's so precious to me. We're having worked on that film.
Now, so many people ask me about that film because when I speak, I don't necessarily prepare a lot of notes, but I tell the guests ahead of time to look at my IMDb page and see if there's something you want to ask me about. Please do. And Goofy movie is
Yeah.
always the first one. But no, that was such a wonderful, wonderful film. Which Dave Stone, of course, supervised it, and I was the sound designer, and it was just so much fun because playing with some of the Jimmy MacDonald stuff. And Jimmy MacDonald was, I mean, he was essentially a Foley guy there at Disney, making all these performance, these
Yes.
props, and
And,
that's why all this stuff had this sort of magic quality about it because it had a performance aspect to it, I think.
talking about Jimmy for a minute, I think that's a good place to really kind of jump off too.
Sure, sure.
Jimmy had these gadgets that he designed coming
Yeah.
from having been a drummer with his drum kit and
Mhm.
doing cartoons for Disney. They had this magical cartoony quality, which then jumps off what Foley artists are thinking about doing with animation.
Mhm.
So he creates this sense of whimsy for Foley that a lot of us then take on because he has these gadgets. And these gadgets are still being shown, I believe, at the Academy. They're
Yeah.
encased, but
I don't know if they have any at the Academy. I haven't seen them. Disney actually puts them on display occasionally. There were some in Florida on display there for a while. The majority of them are still behind lock and key at Imagineering because they still use them for stuff, which is
wow.
amazing. Yeah, they're still in. I mean, they were made to last. I mean, we
Yeah.
actually have one or two little. We have a squeak box and a couple things in the museum. Um, but they were built to last. But I mean, that really is part of Disney's whole style. Their magic, if you will, came from the things that Jimmy made, and hearing those. We hear about sound effects that are used over and over from a library, but some of those got used and used again performance wise. Let's take that off the shelf and use that. And it has that familiarity to it and very distinct sort of signature for those cartoons.
And the thing about Jimmy is, I don't think he realized because he'd started out just working as a drummer and with his drum kit, which
Yeah,
gives him the notions of how to put together these gadgets and these different sounds. He had no idea what he was setting up for the rest of us who became Foley artists. He had no idea he was going to
yeah,
influence what we did.
yeah,
But,
yeah,
and of course, that was never my strength in Foley. My strength was never the animated kind of goofy sound. So whenever I did an animated film, I would pull in someone like Ken DeFay, who really did have a sense of the
mhm.
absurd and the whimsical for animated films. Rest in
But
peace.
but some of
Rest in
them,
peace, Kenny. We love you. We love you. I miss him so much.
oh yeah, yeah. But some of the films like the Disney, the big Disney animated features like Beauty and the Beast and Aladdin had so much of a realistic sense to them
Yeah.
that that it played in well, just doing it as if you were doing a normal live action film.
Yes.
And you go back and you listen to some of the original Disney films, Disney animated films, and there's nothing on the track in the way of Foley or anything like that. Just what they needed to tell the story. You don't hear any footsteps or anything. And what there is occasionally is like a design thing for a story point, like the seven dwarves sneaking around, looking to see what, somebody broke into their house, and Jimmy famously used that leather wallet that he would squeak, and that was a performance-based kind of Foley thing. But as for just regular footsteps, it wasn't anything like that.
This is kind of an interesting thing to talk about for a minute, Steve.
Uh-huh.
I, we've done something strange with animation, and I really wonder about this because
Mm.
as someone who's done animation, I wonder, and I of course love what, like Wall-E. I think I love what was happening with that in animation, and
Yeah.
The Incredibles, and I love the way that Randy Tom made a distinction between when they're the superheroes and then when they're in the real world. I think that's a really important distinction, and I love what he did with that when they're in the real world it's so ordinary sounding, and then when they're superheroes it's so magical sounding.
Mhm.
But I wonder, when we were doing animation before Foley artists got so involved making everything so concrete, I wonder if we lost something with animated films by bringing in so much Foley. And I say this because I am not someone who, as a Foley artist, thinks, oh, Foley should do this, Foley should do that. I am someone who looks at the object and says, as someone who believes in the story world, I wonder what serves the story world of the project the best. Did we lose something, do you think, when we started overdoing or doing so much Foley in animated film and and making everything concrete instead of maybe the way the older animated films used the music for some of the stuff, like dun 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 dun, the way Carl Starling might have done it, or the way the older Disney films did it, with maybe just some of Jimmy's gadgets and then having music tell some of the story with the
Sure.
Mickey Mousing of the steps and things like
Yes.
that.
Yeah.
Did we lose something,
Yeah,
or have we just transitioned into a new way of storytelling using more concretism, using Foley? What do you think?
I'm not sure. I wonder that very same thing. And we're always the work I do with the museum, with all of our webinars and all that. I'm always pushing, story first. And maybe it's just a lack of wisdom and understanding, and just this need to just cover everything and give everyone so many choices that they just end up using everything, and it gets just overblown. I mean, there's a lot of talk about Christopher Nolan soundtracks being, some of the dialogue being completely blown away by the sound effects. And you
And the
start to
music,
wonder whether,
it's
and the
actually the
music too.
music. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
watching Christopher Nolan films, I went to go see Oppenheimer twice,
Mm.
and I wore earplugs the second time because the score was so in my mind, horribly loud
Yeah.
and not connected to the story at all.
Mm.
And being in the Society of Composers and Lyricists and a BMI songwriter, I am an informed musician and an informed composer, and I was repelled. And I argue with people about it from an informed position as a musician and composer. And I don't care for it. Isn't, people say, well, he doesn't like to ADR. And I say, well, it's not about ADR. He could have kept the dialogue intact from production. I don't like the music dominating dialogue. I want to hear what they're saying. And not only that, but I don't like the
No,
incoherence,
absolutely.
not being able to follow the story because he's so busy jumping around on the timeline. And I mean, Memento was great, but there was a reason why the timeline jumped around. So I agree with you. For me, it's story first. So when it comes to animation, because I don't think Foley is always the smartest choice. I wonder,
Oh,
do we clobber it and forget what would serve the story world best? And when we think about animation, not just live action and Christopher Nolan's choice to have music, to in my mind it was not Richard King's sound effects but the music that clobbered the film. And I didn't even understand the score because it didn't seem to support the story. It seemed to be a re-envisioning of Holt's The Planets all the way through. um I couldn't even understand how it had
I
to do.
haven't had a chance to see it, so I'm looking
Oh,
forward to
I'd be
seeing it
very
too.
interested
So
in your perception
it's
because it
interesting.
actually was the
Yeah,
music that you hear. It wasn't
yeah.
Richard King's sound
Oh,
effect. It
that's
was
interesting.
music.
That's interesting. Well,
Yeah.
Richard King's absolutely brilliant.
Oh, he is. I love Richard's work.
Yeah, yeah. No, he's great.
Yeah.
But no, I think, Oppenheimer aside, because I haven't seen it, it's just from what I've heard. But yeah, I think it's just not knowing, just this misguided need to just cover everything in a real bombastic way, and not, learning, the wisdom to just concentrate on what you need.
Yeah.
And, and it's not necessarily just, it's not necessarily the sound crew's fault, because, as you know,
Oh.
with the case of Christopher Nolan, it's the director has the last word.
Mhm.
Um, it was very interesting how, on a Goofy movie, do you remember the scene in a Goofy movie where the car is going down that the lake, and there was one shot, there was kind of a long shot, and it keeps bobbing up and down, and there's a conversation going over the course of the whole scene. And I remember when we were dubbing it, Kevin, told the dialogue mixer, look, we don't have to hear everything because we wouldn't naturally hear everything, but these are the plot points I wanted to
Right.
hit.
Right.
You lied to me, this and this.
Right.
That's, if we hear those lines, make it sound realistic. And that was a really neat little moment that I thought, in a very telling, way, that, the way it should be, really, to tell a story and make sure certain plot points out. You don't, some people feel a need that they have to hear every single word. They don't necessarily have to, but you know if it's purely an artistic choice and not a comprehensible choice, it's kind of you know disheartening a little.
It's interesting. I agree with you. You don't have to, well, as an actor,
Mhm.
I like to hear every word. And as
Sure,
someone who just wrote my very first libretto for a musical called
that's right.
Holy Foley, Holy, Holy Foley, which maybe someday, if I'm really lucky, somebody will actually be interested in, producing it because, it's kind of cool. It's about Foley.
Of course, yeah. Mhm.
But I agree with you that as long as people don't get lost in where the story is and they hear, and this brings me to another thing because you've just brought up another thought that I have.
That's how conversations go.
Yes, directors in animation and how they're different from live action directors. One thing that I learned, and I think this had started with having been married to Dave for all
Mm,
those years, 20 years, and he started out in animation at Hanna-Barbera. And
sure.
I knew nothing about animation until I was with Dave, and I learned so much from him because he was an expert in
Mhm.
animation.
It
And
really is,
so
yeah.
being around animators, and I fell in love with animation directors. I fell in love with animators because they're so different from live action directors. Now, Kevin Lehman had also directed theater, so
Yeah,
he knew how to work with actors. But animation people, those who work in animation and draw and direct animation, have a very different way of working. They have a collaborative way of working that's different than live action directors.
sure.
And we did so much at Disney that I learned a lot and I fell in love with animators.
Mhm.
And I learned so much from them because they collaborate differently and they're so egalitarian. There isn't the hierarchical way of working the way there is in live action.
Yeah,
That was fascinating to me
yeah.
because they have to work together. And then it's just sort of kind of a lucky thing where when like Daryl Rooney and Steve, Steve's last name, and Jerry Rees, all these guys, the way they all work together.
Yeah.
Tim Burton started out in animation, which is why I think he was so great to work with when we
Sure.
worked with him.
Yeah.
So much more collaborative. And I just found the animation guys to just be, and then, you know, a few women, because there weren't that many women, so great to work with. And it doesn't surprise me that Kevin would say something like that, because he's thinking about where the plot points are and what he's also thinking, you know, the scratch track is done before one thing is drawn or now rendered.
Sure.
Scratch track's done first. So they're already thinking about what the voices are doing.
Yeah. All the pacing is thought out, and they have their story reels. Yeah, absolutely.
They're already thinking about what the story is before they've, back in the old day, sketched one pencil sketch and now rendered. And before any of it's become visual, they are already hearing it.
That
which
was
is so
another
fascinating.
thing. That was another thing that was so much fun on those shows, was because I got to work with the picture editor very early, even before the sound supervisors got their, hands on it, because I was pulling sounds for their story reels and all the rough versions. So I got to see how the story was changing and evolving, and,
Wow.
even suggesting a few things, because it was so early, and they, anyone who was involved in the process, they'd listen. They were very receptive to that. So, even on Goofy Movie, I got a few things in. On Beauty and the Beast, I got a couple gags in. So,
Did not know this. I
oh
did.
yeah.
See, I've known Steve Lee a long time, ladies and gentlemen, and I did not know this.
I actually had a webinar with Kirk Wise not too long ago, and that was really fun.
Yeah, he's cool. He's cool.
Yeah, he's a wonderful guy. Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, it's all planned out. I mean, even timing wise and
Yeah.
pacing, all that. And, on a live action film, there are a lot more random elements that come in that could, make or break it. But on animation, they have a very clear idea of where it's going.
And yet there's a
run with
sense
it.
of whimsy and openness. And I think it's
Yeah.
because they have their character sketches and they have the actors look at them, and I did a scratch track right after I did Cats Don't Dance.
Mhm.
The line producer, Jim Katz, who's now in Florida, asked me to do a scratch track for an animated film that never got made. But I actually got to find the casting, because I'd done ADR and I'd led voice casting for ADR. I found some great actor friends who were theater actors and also SAG actors to do the scratch track for this animated film called Hopper, about this penguin, and it never got made, but I got to do the scratch track. It was my That's right. You were one of them. You were one of
them.
Yeah. And so that was, if you remember, what fun we had out. I think it was Santa Monica where we recorded it, in a circle. I'd never done it before, and
it was a great day.
That was so much fun.
No, it's a really fun day. Yeah. And
really
I love it when it's like the old, the table reads they do of some of these scripts, which is just marvelous. Yeah.
And table reading I had done a lot, having started in theater. So I met with Jim.
It was a lot of fun.
And for him, and I have to tell you, I never expected that he would trust me to do that. And it made me feel very respected, but it also gained my respect for him, that he knew I could pull it together. And I've learned a lot about him, by the way. He's in Florida now, and I'm on Facebook with him. He's had so many really interesting, different professions that were quite intelligent professions. This is an interesting fellow. Every time he says, oh yeah, well, when I did this bloody blah, blah, blah job, I bloody blah, blah. And I went, and you did that too? Interesting guy. And that was, and what I learned was the process of just doing a scratch track, because I knew you liked doing voices and you could pull voices together. And then I think there were about 6 or 8 of us, and I did the least interesting voices, because whenever I bring people in, I always do the least amount for myself. But we had, and I brought Diane Michelle in, who did Daisy Duck. I brought her in, and I brought this wonderful actor in who has since then, he did the walrus, or
Mm.
the elephant or the walrus or whatever, and he passed away, but he had unfortunately died of lupus. But he was immensely gifted, and
Yeah.
it's just
Everybody there was stellar. It was really a
learning
good
the
assembly.
process.
And we blew through it too, which
Yeah,
is a really good sign of, yeah. It was really a good sign when we just bam, bam, bam. We, hit
yeah,
all our marks and just went through it. And that's a really good sign of casting the group, the ensemble. So
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Smart bunch of smart actors. It was really fun.
Yeah.
So another thing that I was curious about is I've been talking to everybody I've talked with has had strong opinions about two different things.
Oh boy.
The and it's really interesting how they've had very similar opinions.
Okay.
And I won't say what they are. They've had very similar, and I've talked to editors, Foley artists, sound designers, and they've been inside the country and outside the country
Mhm.
about the expanded use of technology and whether or not they feel it's imposing upon the art and craft, and the impending use of AI. Now,
Right.
those things are connected, but they're also different. So I'm wondering
Yeah.
what your thoughts are.
Uh, I have a few. A few thoughts on the matter. I'm really it's funny because I've never really been a tech guy, but I've always been in awe of the tools that we use and how they evolve and how they make it easier for us. Not always necessarily faster, but I mean, obviously going digital saved us lots of space in the office when we used to have rows and rows of film going down the hall. Um, I think though that the ability to just click a button on your computer and have a dozen more tracks doesn't let people be as creative as they could be, I think. I think it's harmful in some ways to have the ease of just just layering stuff on top of stuff, because when we had less tracks and there was more to it than just clicking a button, we were very more thoughtful of what we did and what was really important to have. And now, you can go online and buy sound effects libraries, and there are even supposedly Foley libraries out there that you can buy. And it seems like just too much. There's very little ingenuity now. And I'm always sweeping away at this, fighting against it in all of my lectures and all of my talks about being more creative. And you hop online and you go into some of these chat rooms with some of these kids, and they're talking about all these plugins and pieces of equipment and all that. And I'll occasionally jump in. I mean, I'm feeling, well, like I'm getting pretty curmudgeonly about this, the get off my lawn crowd. But I'll jump into these chats every so often and say, when was the last time you guys actually went out and recorded sounds
Yeah,
out in the real world? And they'd either just not answer or say, "Oh, no, I have a big library." Where did it come from? I would ask. And, they got it online, or they bought a CD collection or something like that. And I just keep jumping on my soapbox saying the more original sounds you record, that when, during your downtime or on a show, that you build a library of your own palette, your own distinct palette, is going to it's going to set you apart from everyone else worried about what plugin they're going to use when they haven't even recorded the sound that they're supposedly going to use that plugin on.
right.
It just that's one thing that really bugs me, and I'm always fighting against. So that's the answer to the one question about AI. I think it's going to take a while before it gets really dangerous for us. I think the technology is evolving every day. It's kind of scary reading how good it's getting. But as for something so dependent upon performance to make it, for its charm, like Foley, uh, an AI program, I don't think it's going to get there for a long, long time. I think it will eventually, but it depends on what it's drawing from, what its palette is that it's getting this stuff from. It's going to have a database of sounds to draw upon to make the sounds it needs. And there are all kinds of legal issues about that. I mean, we just had that wonderful actor strike that the main thrust of that whole argument is
Mhm.
using actors, their being as a commodity that can just be added to a library. Um, there's still lots of questions, but I think we have a little bit more time to worry about it. I think we should start thinking ahead, because it's going to get there. It will eventually get there where, an AI program can do a half decent job of footsteps and cloth movement and things like that. Some of the more specific stuff, I'd like to think that we'll always need a Foley performer, to create this stuff. But I'd be very interesting to see. I mean, I'm not tech savvy enough to know how fast and how thorough it can be. But I think it'll probably get there eventually.
But what I wonder, here's where I would push back on that idea.
Mm,
Can it make the artistic decisions
yeah.
vary from things? For example, and this would be the Walter Murch argument. I'll never forget Malcolm Fife telling me that when they were doing English Patient, Walter wanted the Foley artist to actually not walk every footstep because he didn't want to hear every single footstep in English Patient. I also know that talking to the re-recording mixers, Walter liked to go record Foley outside on dirty steps in different buildings to get a different kind of natural, strange sound and not have it sound like it was on a stage. So, sure. And a lot of Foley in other countries isn't shot always on a stage. They'll go outside, they'll go into different rooms. The French Foley has lots of different rooms that they construct. So if you're not having Foley sound every footstep, if every footstep isn't perfect, if it's going to sound natural, if it's going to sound like the footfall is a little bit uneven, if it's going to sound like this one walks on, hits the grit, and that one doesn't hit the grit, if the grit's really gritty on that footstep but not so gritty on that footstep, if the individual is making conscious choices about how this character is walking every step and it's not perfect, AI isn't going to be having that feel. And I'll never forget,
no,
and
absolutely not.
I said this to one of the Foley artists I was interviewing, what Bob Rutledge always said, you can't cut feel. And so
it's true.
Yeah. And
not
so
yet anyway.
You can always get the impacts. You can always get
no, you get the hard stuff. I mean, that's what I'm wondering. I'm wondering if the first incarnation of it will just hit the hard stuff and then have a really talented Foley artist do it's like hiring someone to paint a painting for you on a particular subject, It's like the props in this film is really specific and we need somebody that can handle this very delicately or whatever, footsteps, all that stuff, cloth movement,
Or maybe certain projects don't really require all the finessing, will be the paint by number kind of AI thing. But if you really want the high level artistic feel, it kind of makes me think about the film Maestro. I don't know if you did go to Maestro. Beautiful film.
It's hard to believe that's Bradley's second film he's directed.
You know what? I got to tell you, I went to Warner Brothers and went to the sound show.
Yeah.
And Bradley was there and Richard King was there. And it was really lovely to be with mixers that I knew and to be there and listen to Bradley talk about it. And there's just a small group of us that were in the guild that were there. And it was nice to be around my peeps and be back on a dub stage that I've been on and be around people I knew and talk shop. And I got the sense of this director being so sensitive to specificity, that this is someone whose choices were so specific and precise and personal,
Yeah.
that with a director like that,
Yeah.
actually made choices in the
Yeah.
scene where he's jumping down and jumping on the bed. And the Foley, of course, was done by Hi-Fi Foley, who does beautiful work. And I interviewed them for the Foley Grail when they were brand new. They had not done much. Mike Horton does beautiful work. I think directors like that are not going to want paint by number Foley. They're going to want the personal, very specific, precise, delicate touch that Bradley Cooper will want. And yes, it is a pièce de résistance of a film when you stop to think of these very precise detail this man has gone to get details correct.
Yeah.
Sensitivity and nuance.
It was deceptively subtle. It was really beautiful. I thought it was a really good job.
And the sound and the Foley, and not just the visual and not just the directing and not just the acting, but every craft component has the artistry of a film that feels two different things to me. And I was really listening carefully at the sound show at Warner Brothers, where certain clips were there, and Dean Sapanchik was one of the I was his very first Foley artist he ever worked with too, back at Lens. So we went back, and it was really like old Homes Week, which was really nice.
Yeah,
what a good guy. What a dear gentleman he is.
Yeah.
Every moment had very specific reasons that the sound was the way it was. And then of course the music, being so much a part of the story, was the story, never bombards, but is the movie is the music is the movie. The music is the story. And the torturous soul of the person is revealed within the way the music comes out. And it's just a remarkable film. And I saw two things about this film and the way Bradley Cooper approached it. One was, it was very much classical Hollywood cinema, in that it was the old way of making a film.
Yeah.
Really clear, precise storytelling from the old Hollywood way of making a film, which I really appreciated after all the gimmickry that goes on.
Well, the whole use of black and white in the first half, and then into Technicolor, and then into, conventional. And no, it was just, it was brilliant. Yeah.
And it also had a European sensibility in that there was the complication of emotionality and relationship that a lot of American films don't really get into.
Yeah, no.
So
absolutely.
It's a really unusual film, and I loved the use of sound.
I agree. A lot of people were.
It's another Richard King.
Yeah.
And of course, I knew Richard way back in the Saban days, when we both, when I was doing some low budget in between high budget, and I knew him way back. And he does such beautiful work. But this is a lovely film.
Absolutely, yeah. I got to chat with my friend Paul Barreltonger, who was one of the editors on it.
Yeah,
he told me a few little bits about it. I'm looking forward to that doing well in award season, because it was really good.
You mentioned something else too that I want to go back to, because I think you said something I think is really important, Steve, and that is, when we pull up all these tracks, well, because you do say things that are important. You pull up all these tracks and you can just click, and you've got 10 extra tracks you can put sound on.
Yeah.
It reminds me of something that Dave and I used to talk about when we went digital, and it used to frustrate us because the young people would start pulling up all these tracks and just put a bunch of sounds in. And the thing that we used to talk about was, when you have to make a picture edit, you're working on film and you're making a splice, you have to think about the splice you're going to make if you're working on film. If you're working on a chem and you're cutting your frame, you have to think about what you're going to do and you have to open your book and you have to make your cut notes, and you have to have your assistant make sure all the change notes are in there. And you have to think very carefully about what frames you're going to cut and where you're going to put your splices before you make your cut on your picture frame, before you make your picture cuts. You can't just do it. But once you have an Avid, you can just start cutting and cutting and cutting and, oh, change notes. Oh, that's right. We have to change things for sound. And oh gosh, and one cut in an Avid is maybe 30 or 40 cuts for a sound editor.
Yeah.
As soon as you go digital, you can be really reckless because it's non-destructive, and you can do this and go do that and go back and forth and back and forth. But when you're cutting in analog, you have to be very mindful about the cut because it's destructive, and you have to put your frames somewhere, and you have to put them up on the trim bin. You have to think about what you're doing before you make your cut.
Especially if you're away from the shop and it's going to be a day or two to get another print of whatever you're doing. You have to think these things through so carefully. And then you have people like the great Warren Hamilton, who did his cue sheets in ink, and like every cut was just perfect.
Yes,
You know,
yes. Warren, and let us clarify for people who may not know what we're talking about when they go to cue sheets. Warren Hamilton, Dr. Warren,
bless his heart, Uncle Warren,
used to make his cue sheets not in pencil and then go back and ink them in. But his first cue sheets, when he would put his sound effects on his moviola and put them in, he would be so clear about what he was going to do, and so precise that he would put his first cuts in ink, and they would never change because they were perfect the first time.
I felt that back in that era, there were two different kinds of editors. There was one editor who was really good and really fast, and he'd get it done in a week or so, get his reel done. And then there were editors like Warren. It might take a week and a day, you know, might take a little longer. But when his reels got to the stage, they were perfect. There were no fixes or anything like that. The other guy, he'd deliver on time, but they're always, you know, finessing a few little things here and there. And you know, it's almost like casting when you hire editors, because sometimes you have to think ahead to what you're going to need for the particular project time-wise and all that. And you have to consider that sort of thing too. And yeah, it was just, Warren was just so damn good, and he made it look effortless.
Yeah, he was a very mindful editor.
Yeah.
And when I think about the way that I would cue, when I would cue Foley, because I tend to be methodical.
Yeah.
So when I would cue Foley, I would think ahead. This person's going to be on track one, but when they have to switch tracks, or they have to switch surfaces, or there's a dissolve, I'm going to use the second track here or that. I would think it ahead of time.
Yeah.
I would get cue sheets from some other people. They might not think it through, and it would be chaotic.
Sure.
Or when I would, and it would be frustrating. Or when I would, or even now, it's really funny. I notice I'm a planner. And I notice how much I plan, how I think ahead. And it also showed up on the Foley stage. And here's how it showed up on the Foley stage. There are Foley artists who you walk in and the Foley stage is an absolute wreck, and there's stuff everywhere and it's a mess.
Yeah.
And then there are Foley artists who are like Jerry Trent, who has his bags absolutely perfect. Everything's in exactly the same bag. Everything.
They put their toys back after they've played with them.
And then there's me, who's in the middle.
Yeah.
I would have the bags that I knew were shoes, the bags that I knew that were metal, the bags that I knew were paper, the bags that I knew, and it was in the middle. It was somewhat organized, but it wouldn't be perfect.
Yeah.
But I put everything away every single night so that when I walked in the next morning, the Foley stage was clean, because I cannot think in a mess.
Yeah.
So when I came in and I had to share a Foley stage with somebody who was the chaotic, messy type, I would have to clean the Foley stage before I got started, because I could not start if the Foley artist who'd been there before was the kind that left the stage messy. I'd go, I know who was just here. I knew who was here last night. I know who did the night shift. Oh my God, I need coffee. Because I would have to clean up before I got started because I could not start. I couldn't start because
Yeah,
look
need a clean
around,
slate.
my brain would just like, I have to tidy. So I am a planner. It's like, okay, I have to start all over. I have to take half an hour cleaning the stage because I can't start in a mess.
Yeah.
But these other people, they have messy stages, and I don't know how they do it. For me, it's chaos.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying, there's not a right or wrong here. It's a different way of processing. But
Yeah.
I'm a planner. And so I have to like tidy it up before I go. I have to have it, okay, everything has to be like, this is here and this is here, and here's the script and here's this, and okay. Because
Mhm.
otherwise my brain will scramble. And so when you talk about, and 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 then Dave Stone, I would say, is that person in the middle.
Yeah.
He is so organized. Of course, he's an amazing dialogue editor, but he's also very good at sound effects,
Mhm.
and he's really organized. He can handle paper. I do not organize paper well. I would
Mhm.
always say, Dave, here's all the paper. Could you organize it, please? Um, he's very organized and very, very good at figuring things out.
Yeah.
Uh, always does things in pencil and then inks it in. Would
Mhm.
only have to change a couple of things, but very organized. He's
Mhm.
what I would call not quite Warren Hamilton, but pretty organized.
Yeah, I
Certainly not a,
agree.
but he's very fast. But he's
Yeah.
not, but not haphazard at all.
And that was a powerhouse team when they were both on a show like Beetlejuice or, Edward Scissorhands or, yeah, it was amazing to
Yeah,
watch.
yeah.
Amazing to watch.
It's
No, I
really
like,
interesting. People have just so many different processes. But I
yeah,
do find that digital has created a different kind of the younger editors who never knew analog and didn't
yeah.
have to make the choices. I don't know that they ever learned the same kind of discipline of having to know what they were going to do before they did it.
That's one of the things I stress with the Hollywood Sound Museum. I mean, I'm really trying to show them what it was like back then.
Yeah,
Because whenever I talk, I don't talk much about the tech. I talk about the process and the philosophies behind it, because those things never change. And the basic way of doing things is still basically the same. It's just the tools keep evolving. We can't keep up with them almost. But you still have to find your sounds, you have to cut your sounds, you have to layer them in a certain way and make them, ready for a mix. Um, it's all that has not changed, and I don't think it will, whether it's one person doing it or a crew of 50. Um, just the delegation of the tasks changes. And, nowadays it seems, and that's another thing that's, because of the technology, people think that, we can have two or three people do the work where it was dozens before. Yeah, I'm sure you could probably make that happen, but I don't, I'm getting old, Vanessa.
no,
I'm getting more curmudgeonly about all
it's
this.
really
When
funny.
I was your age,
It's really funny. I talked last episode with Misha Yakovlevich from Serbia, who calls himself a grumpy old man now. Um, and he he's a delight. He is so funny. He's hysterically funny and very charming. And it's I think those of us who are, and he's worked digitally for a long time. And I think those of us that have been around for a while and seen a lot of changes,
Mhm.
we all say the same thing, which is the technology is starting to change people are getting too focused on the tools and not really understanding the art and the craft. And I think there's always a danger. And I look specifically at, because I did also edit, but I edited Foley and ADR. I did not edit sound effects. I edited Foley and ADR, but I taught sound effects. I taught sound effects editing, and but everything for me is performative. Even the ADR was performative, and I taught students how to do ADR, and I taught them how to do Foley, and I did teach them sound editing, but I focused mostly on Foley and ADR. So the performative sound.
Sure.
And what I always try to tell them is the tools will change.
Yeah.
Tools will change. So don't get so caught up in the tools.
Yeah.
Every 5 years, you're going to be learning new tools. So don't think it's about the tools. It's never about the tools. And that kind of takes us back to Jimmy MacDonald.
Yeah.
Because his tools were gadgets.
And he would make something. If he needed a sound, I'd say go out and record it. He would go and make something. He
Right.
would make a prop that made that sound. There's that one very famous story about Jimmy that I'd heard. I can't remember who told it. I think I might have heard it from Jimmy in one of his interviews, but one of the first days he was working on he had been hired sight unseen by Walt, but it was recommended to him that this guy is good, let's get him. He was working on the Technicolor short, The Old Mill, which has this big rainstorm. And Jimmy was building this rain prop this is so Jimmy MacDonald. He had a big drum and he put like dozens of hundreds of like finishing nails, little tiny finishing nails into the drum. So they're pointed out inside.
Mm-hmm.
And then he filled the drum with dried Mexican peas. Sealed it up, put it on a turning device so you could crank it, and it made the sound of rain. Anyway, he's building this ridiculous thing, and Walt decides to come down and say hi for the first time. And asks him, what the hell is this that you're making? And Jimmy says, oh, it's a rain machine. You crank it, it makes rain. And I just found out that if you crank it faster, it makes surf. It makes the sound of surf. Walt apparently didn't say a thing. He walked away with his eyebrows up. And Jimmy was like, oh crap, I've been fired. I don't know what that means. And he kept working. A couple days later, he goes to pick up his check and it had doubled.
Oh, wow.
So Walt knew, this guy's good.
Yeah. Wait, that's a great story.
But that's but that's the kind of guy Jimmy was. It was just, well, I can build this, or, anything from a mosquito to a train, he would have a prop for it.
So this is kind of a nice way to wrap up this whole thing, is starting with Jimmy and ending with Jimmy. The idea of, these people who were drummers and worked with drum kits.
Yeah.
Very specific ways of hearing sounds. And so much of the way sound effects started with sound in silent motion pictures.
Yeah, silent motion pictures and vaudeville even before that. The guy in the pit performing all the slide whistles and the little props and all that. That's how it started.
It starts there, and then with Jack Foley taking a class at USC and learning about this new sound technology, and then getting some of these ideas and doing it at Universal, and radio taking off and doing some of these things. It all starts with these people who are doing percussive sounds.
Yeah. And
a lot of it are drummers using drum kits and all of the little funny sounds. And it keeps expanding, it keeps changing. And then when you juxtapose that with this idea of technology that's supposed to be doing all of the special stuff, but you cannot remove it from the innovation of people coming up with ideas and making things too.
Absolutely.
So I think what I look forward to as we go into 2024 is what will happen with human innovation that isn't necessarily technological, which is a moneymaker for people in technology, but the innovators who will actually make things that isn't necessarily technological.
There's a certain amount of it that can go hand in hand with technology. I mean, it's going to be that way from now on. It's like we're not, there's no turning back. I mean, there is a resurgence of analog things, and people are still shooting on film and recording on tape and things like that. And that's great. But, we're still moving forward. It's how you use the tools creatively, regardless of what it is. I think that, that needs to be forced, and I'm doing my part. And really quick, also to go back to your whole AI thing, I think also early on, I think we're going to find that the I don't want to use the word cheaper. I think some of the more mass-produced product, like, I always remember the stories that Mark and Dave were talking about Hanna-Barbera, how they would just grind this stuff out like a sausage
Yeah.
factory.
And for everybody,
Um,
we mean Mark Mangini and Dave Stone.
yes, thank you.
Right.
When they worked at Hanna-Barbera, they had this huge order every week of something like 5 hours of cartoons, and that they had to generate. And it becomes a sausage factory after a point. I think that some of that sort of thing, although there's some really wonderful, innovative animated series now that is, you know, miles away from what they were doing at Hanna-Barbera, but still, schedules are very tight, budgets are very tight. I think that's where we're going to see some of the first incarnations of these AI
Right.
monsters. Um, and that'll be another big signpost that, like, whoa, okay, it's creeping up on us. It's just over the hill. So we have to be wary about that. And I think that, back to the previous thread in our talk, the creativity, I think that that's a good way of sort of fighting against that. It's just showing how innovative people were back in the day and how those techniques can be used with the new technology to make everybody's work more distinctive and more, fun and good.
That's a that
I'm
is
running
a
out of words.
that is a wonderful way, actually a wonderfully positive, uplifting way to end this, Steve. Thank you.
Well, Vanessa, thank you. I love you so
Oh,
dearly.
I love you too. And
You've been in my life for so long when I was starting this journey, and I'm really fortunate. I have some really wonderful, talented friends who have been along for the ride.
I
So
can't think of a better person to ring out 2023 in sound. You will, I will be talking to you in the new year. Have a wonderful holiday.
you too, dear.
Um,
Yeah,
we'll see you in next year.
I
I'm
hope
going to
so.
be seeing you soon, and take care of yourself. And everybody, look for the Hollywood Sound Museum and all things Steve Lee. And thank you so much.
Yeah, hollywoodsoundmuseum.org. You can see what we're doing, and we have a Patreon account. You can join us there and see our webinars. Please check us out. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you.